Smarties, we are thrilled to welcome parent educator, coach, former elementary school administrator, and former special education teacher, Sari Goodman, to the podcast. She talks to us about the importance of empathy, being a resource for parents who don't know what to do, but they know they need help, and how critical a village is. We also talk about how important it is to demystify educational jargon and some really, really simple tricks to help parents and lay people understand their learner and their learner's profile. She also shares with us about how we need to prioritize storytelling in our communication with parents. Smarties, this is a really great conversation with Sari, and we thank you as always for being a part of our community. Be sure you are on our email list. We don't spam, we don't send too many emails, but we do give away a little bit more in the emails, including freebies and all those things. So you can sign up for our email list on our website, www.learnsmarterpodcast.com. Let's take it.
You want to learn faster, but sometimes working harder is just not the answer. You have to learn smarter. The Educational Therapy Podcast.
Hi, Smarties. Welcome to episode 363 of Learn Smarter, the Educational Therapy Podcast. I'm Stephanie Pitts.
And I'm Rachel Kapp.
And today we are really excited. We have Sari Goodman with us, who is a parent educator, coach, former elementary school administrator, and former special education teacher. So she has a lot that she's going to share with us today. We're thrilled. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here.
You're all official with your microphone, Sari. I love it so much.
Yeah.
So Steph just introduced you, but why don't you introduce yourself to our audience and share a little bit of your story and then what you're doing now?
Okay. So like Steph said, I started out as a special ed teacher and became an elementary school principal. And I did a lot of work with not just students and teachers, but also with parents. And as time went on, and I did it for a really long time, I found that more and more parents were asking me for help and support and asking questions and realizing that parents don't have a lot of places to ask questions. They don't have a lot of trustworthy people. There's so much information now, more and more and more out there with people telling parents what to do and what not to do. Where do they go? Where do they ask? And so I was helping a lot of parents, and I found myself meeting with parents more than I was meeting with teachers and students, and realizing all of a sudden parents were saying, you know, I have a friend whose child doesn't go here, but she really needs somebody like you to talk to. And so that was born the Parental Edge. That's my company. And I started helping parents even outside my school. And along the way, I went back to school and got a certificate in parent education and coaching because I had all these other certificates that were for teachers and students. Now I needed for parents with the full intention of helping the parents at my school. And it just grew. And now I'm focusing that full time because I think that parents just really need somebody to ask, who do you call? I'm like the person in their back pocket. No, the school called, or my son did this, or my daughter is asking about that. You know, who do I ask?
It's so true. You know, I'm so early into our academic experience, and I'm fortunate to have people like you and people like Steph on speed dial who will take my call, you know, and who will talk me through some things. And I know when we had coffee a few weeks ago, we talked through some stuff too. But I'm really excited to have this conversation with you today. Out of the conversations that you have with parents, what are some of the things that you notice they're asking?
A lot of times, why does my child listen to you but doesn't listen to me? Why is there so much homework? Why is this so hard? I feel like I'm yelling all the time and I just don't want to be that parent. I want to be an advocate for my child, but I don't want to be labeled as that parent. What do I do?
Mm-hmm. Totally.
Right? I hate parent conferences. What do I do? I feel so bad when I go and I talk to the teacher. So those kinds of things.
All of that is what do you do when you don't know what to do?
Right.
You call Sari.
You call Sari is basically what you do. And all very important questions that the parents have. And Rachel and I are definitely seeing that on the phone calls that we're having with parents. It's a lot of the same questions and not knowing how to navigate. And so glad to have a resource like you to come on.
A lot of intensity. Let's talk about that. The intensity of emotion when it's your own kid.
Yes.
I mean, Steph, you and I have spoken about this, and Sarah, you and I have spoken about this. When it's your own child, it's a very different experience. And I have a lot of looking back, a different type of empathy for the families when I was a teacher in the classroom. But how do you sort of approach that intensity of feeling? Because frankly, I think it's primal. The feedback about your kid that might be difficult to hear.
Right. You have to start out by understanding, if you're the educational therapist, you have to start out by understanding where a parent is coming from. And if you're a parent, you have to understand where your emotions are coming from and realizing you really can't think straight. And so if you're the educational therapist, you have to approach with empathy. And if you're the parent, you have to approach yourself with empathy. You have to have empathy for your own self, right? And I think that we parents have so much pressure on them. I have an example. My kids are grown, but at one point when one of my kids was younger, he had a really significant stutter. And I was told at the time, this was like 20 years ago, so we know more now, but he'll grow out of it. It'll be fine. Just talk slower, or those kinds of things.
Wait for him. Yeah.
Just wait. Everything will be fine. Just wait.
It'll be fine. Yeah. Well, it wasn't fine. It got worse and worse and worse to the point where he was crying, Mommy, I can't talk. Why can't I talk? So,
Gut-wrenching.
Gut-wrenching. I knew a lot of people because I was in the school system, and I went to a very wonderful speech pathologist who said, get your child to Children's Hospital immediately. Why was it an emergency? Because apparently there's an age at which fixing a stutter is easy, and past a certain age, it gets harder and harder and harder. He was almost out of that range, and he was accepted under emergency at Children's Hospital. And so the speech therapist is talking to me and telling me and what I need to practice at home and what's happening here. And I tell you, the first couple of times I didn't hear a thing that was said because I was feeling so shamed and guilty.
Of course.
Here I am, an educator. I should have known, but I didn't know. And I go through the spiral, like, what if my child can never talk and this is all my fault? And go through all these things and realizing I literally did not hear a thing that was said to me. And so when you're an educational therapist and you're seeing a blank or maybe just a blank nod, not quite sure that you're getting through, what you may be seeing is this emotional shame or guilt. Maybe it was me. Maybe I did something wrong. Maybe, I should have known. I shouldn't have listened. Why did I? Oh, all these things are going.
I've never had a family call, Sari, where the parent hasn't said, I wish I had done this sooner.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Of course. And you didn't know. You were just going with the advice at the time and trusting the experts.
Right.
You're not a speech pathologist.
Nope.
You don't know what you don't know.
You don't know what you don't know, but our culture says if you have a child and you become a parent, you're just supposed to know what to do. You're supposed to be an expert. And we live with this feeling like, well, gosh, if I don't know what to do or I have this question, I must be a failure. And so that's where we get a lot of this frustration and anger and pushback from parents. It's really not about us. It's not about what we're saying. It's about what they're feeling inside. And so one of the first things we have to do as professionals is say, I get you, right? And realize where this is coming from. We speak in jargon, right? We're aware that we're talking about reading comprehension and visual memory and all these things. And we understand we have to use synonyms and examples and break it down. We know that. But there's this other level of how do I get through to parents? And then there's this other level for parents. How do I come to grips with this so that I can be a real strong advocate for my child?
There's so much about what you said that I want to sort of go back to. I know when I'm getting feedback about my boys that it helps when the teacher starts with, this was me. Like, I had this experience, and Rachel, they're doing XYZ now. Like, that does immediately like lower the blood pressure in the room. Having that sort of empathy coming from the person connecting with you is really, really important. But then the other thing that you said that I think is really, really critical is when you become a parent, all of a sudden you feel like you should be an expert on all these things. You should be an expert on how to feed your child, and you should be an expert on what toys they should play with and what the toys should look like. And there is information overload. And then we don't set our society up, at least in the United States, in a way where there's your village immediately around you, right? Like your little nuclear family, and then your village can be really widely dispersed, or you might not have much. Can you talk a little bit about that component of it? I feel like in your role as the parenting coach, like you're like, hi, I'm here. I'm the village, right?
Right. And I also help parents build their village or build their team. You know, sometimes parents, they have their teachers, right? They have their educational therapist. Sometimes they have a psychologist. They have their pediatrician. And what I find sometimes is parents don't know how to communicate with all those people. So you've got people who know only part of the story. So I'll say things like, well, did you tell the educational therapist this? Did you ask the pediatrician? This is something they need to know. And so I coach them into this kind of communication of these people are your village only if you communicate with them. So that's part of it. The other part of it is that, you know, we have this dream when we're pregnant of who our child is going to be. And we don't dream that they're going to have a learning disability, right? We don't dream about this. We dream about perfection. And then we get this wonderful individual who is its own personality. And we're raising this individual that may not necessarily match our dream. And so every time someone talks to us about what we need to do to make things better, we're reminded that this is not our dream. Parents feel very guilty about this, but sometimes they're mourning the loss of their dream. And so when we talk to parents about fixing things, what we need to do is we need to do it from a village point of view of this is where we're headed. And we're here to help you. So as opposed to you need to practice, you need to do this at home, you need to fix your child. So many teachers will call up and say, your child doesn't focus in class.
What do you want me to do about that at home?
Like the parent's supposed to do something about that. Like what? Like what? I'm not there, right?
The teacher's the adult in charge in those moments, yes.
So what are you supposed to do? And so now who do you call when you're feeling like people are just telling you things? So you need your village. Not only do you need the professional village, but you need a relative village. What if you have relatives that are not quite sure if what you're doing is correct? You know, well, you were fine. You know, you had this when you were young and now look at you like it was magic. And so even in the family, there might be some denial or pressure. And so who is that village? Well, you look for your friends, your relatives, your whoever who get you. The fact is that everyone's struggling with children. It's just not easy. So all kids have stuff. And this is what I tell parents all the time. It's my favorite line. All kids have stuff. So you just find parents who are willing to share with you the stuff they're going through with their kids, and bingo, you are their village and they're yours.
It's really true. And, you know, even going back to me and Steph's origin story of our friendship was based off the fact that we were telling each other what was going on.
Right.
We weren't competitive with one another. We became each other's village in school. And you don't need a lot of people.
No.
And actually, too many voices can be confusing.
Right.
Right? Like you need one or two people that you can go to and say, I really like their parenting style. I really like their approach. And then you're the person they call too.
Yes.
Right? And so I so appreciate you sort of starting from that community perspective. I would love to hear a little bit more about our educational jargon, because I have noticed that this is something that I do. First of all, I speak very quickly. And I know that I have to slow things down for processing time, and it's something I'm working on, Sari, but it's not intuitive for me. And I can throw a lot of information at parents who use a lot of big terms and a lot of language, and I totally know what I'm saying, and they're left sort of with their wheels spinning. So one of the things that I'll do is I'll send a follow-up email and say, hey, this is what we talked about. Watch it again. Consume the information again. And oh, by the way, you're going to hear it a third time too. Like, you're going to hear the same information multiple times presented by different people in a variety of ways, at least at Kapp Ed Therapy, and I know at my Ed Therapist too. So how do we sort of work on that jargon component that for us, this is what it's called, this is the word? What do we do?
When we do that, I depend upon Responsive Classroom, which is a social emotional program that's used in schools, and I use it all the time. And one of the strategies is, what does it look like and sound like? So when you're describing, let's just say, reading comprehension, we need to increase fluency in reading comprehension. That's pretty common, right? I know what that means.
Mm-hmm. I know what that means. Yeah.
But what does it look like and what does it sound like? Well, it looks like, kids are wondering why CHOOSE says choose and LOOSE says loose.
Very good questions to be asking.
Yes. So you give a real solid example of what question is and why. And it's not the child, it's really the English.
Yeah.
Right? And so now you're not saying, well, your child doesn't know how this, but you say, isn't it nuts that this is what we're trying to teach children to do? No wonder they're confused. Or this is how your child sounds. I'm going to make something up like, I like to drive a car. And that's called hesitation. And what we want to do is I like to drive a car. And it's not, I like to drive a car. That's not where we're headed. But that's important.
It is.
To specify to parents where they're aiming for, right? They don't know. And they're not going to say, I don't know, because they feel like they're supposed to know. Because again, you're supposed to be an expert on everything.
Yeah.
I mean, right? You're supposed to be an expert on toddlers and on elementary school and on middle school and on high school. Oh, yes. And how to get into college. Then you have to be an expert there, too. Well, who other professions are experts in everything? Doctors aren't experts in everything, right?
Right.
But we expect parents to be experts in everything. It's just not fair, in my opinion. So going back to, what does it look like? What does it sound like? That slows you down. And it also makes you think, what kind of example can I give that fits that look like, sound like? Because that's what parents need to understand. And once they go, oh, I get it.
And they can identify it.
Right.
They can get it. They can see it in their kid and they can work towards that goal with you.
Right.
Okay. I really like that. It's a very simple tool of what does it look like? What does it sound like?
Right.
I would like to know the journey. What does the journey look like for a parent from the parent's perspective, but also from the educational therapist's perspective of support? So the parent has this shame because they didn't do something, and then now all of a sudden there's this sense of urgency and they don't know who to turn to and how to do it.
Oh, the panic of your story. I can't even imagine.
100%. So they're contacting you, let's just start there. They're contacting you. What does that look like?
That looks like, what keeps you up at night?
Ah,
That's the question.
I love that question.
Because there's all kinds of things. We want to teach our children manners, and we want to teach them to clean up, and we want them to do chores, and we want them to be great at school. And the list goes on and on and on and on. We want them to be good humans, right? And so it's all going on in your brain all the time, but you can't work on all those things all the time. That's where the pressure is. But there's usually one thing that's keeping you up at night. That's your goal. We look for the goal. We look for a starting point.
I love the starting point. I love the starting point very much, because that is the first step, right? The first step up the staircase is, we talk about that with educational therapy. Okay, so that's the parent. Let's think about what's keeping you up at night, and knowing also you can't do all the things all at once. Not going to work.
Right.
So from an educational therapist point of view,
right,
what's some language to help the parent who feels so frantic and wants to do all the things, even though we're saying we need to start in one spot? What's some language that you suggest we could talk to those parents?
You want to start with the transformation, because they're in a panic. They're in a panic that their children will never blah, 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 or may not ever blah, blah, blah. And so they're in a panic. So how do you bring the panic down? You talk about the goal. This is where we're headed. We're going to get here.
And can the goal be a very big arching goal, or it's one small goal?
It could be a very big arching goal, and then you use analogies and stories as much as you can. Analogies and stories.
That's my jam.
Okay.
Very much.
Yes. Well, you did a podcast recently about why do sessions take so long? And you told a story, Steph, about a student you had. It took you like 3 months to teach one math skill. But once you did that,
yes,
the floodgates opened. And
that they did.
I bet every single educational therapist has one of those stories. That's the story that you tell. Parents need stories. They need to know. You need to normalize struggle in order to reach the goal. And that happens with stories. It happens with analogies. You can analyze it as, my goal is to get to Paris.
Right.
I would love to go.
Yeah, it sounds like a good goal, Sari.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I can't just get on a plane and go to Paris. What do I need to do? I need to make sure I have a passport.
All the executive functioning.
I need to plan. Do I have a tour? Do I have hotels? Right? There's a lot that goes into that kind of planning. And I can just hire
a travel agent.
A travel agent.
Hey, you still have to ask a friend for a referral for a travel agent. We all think it's going to be easier.
Yeah.
Sometimes it is, but there's still work involved in that.
Correct. And then that's how you explain. Pick something big like that. It doesn't have to be my analogy. It can be any analogy, but there's always steps involved.
Improper fractions. It was 3 months of improper fractions during COVID, and it was rough.
Right. Well, your point that you were talking to educational therapists about how you need to stick with it.
Yes.
And how the student stuck with it.
And the parents stuck with it.
The parents stuck with it.
Honestly, I think that could not be more important to talk about, because one of the things that I think we feel often as educational therapists, and I coach my team with this a lot, that trying to get so much done in session, trying to hit that goal so quickly after a few sessions, and it's not a magic pill, and we can't change something overnight. You don't grow up overnight. You don't learn how to do something overnight. Nothing works that way. And anxiety gets in the way, results, right? If something doesn't work, pivot. But sometimes the thing that works is sticking with it.
Right. And you have to realize that it's perhaps someone in the family is saying, what's taking so long?
Right.
This is costing so much money.
100%.
How much longer do I have to pay for this? And you might even have a teacher, because I've seen this happen too, who questions, I wonder, why is this educational therapist taking so long?
Yeah. We got to check our own ego.
Right.
In those situations.
And the pressure, let's take math. I think math sometimes is easier to talk about because it's fairly concrete. But the programs now in math where kids are learning a new skill daily.
Yes.
Even kids without educational challenges are challenged because they don't have enough time to practice. So this whole idea of practice and guided practice and extra practice to learn is not part of the program. So they're moving so fast. That's the milieu, that it's moving fast.
Yeah, no, it's true. And to give an analogy of the three of us have the goal of getting a 6-pack, we're not going to all get there at the same time.
Correct. Or ever.
Or ever.
Or ever. But I've told parents many times, so much depends on What are you doing outside of session? How many times are you going? What are you eating? How are you taking care of your body? Like there's so many different factors to keep track of.
Yes.
And often parents come and say to me, how long is this going to take? Or how many sessions do you need? And I will literally answer it with anybody who gives you a concrete number is not going to be what I agree with, because there is no way to predict that XYZ will happen by XYZ time. Every kid is different. Every situation is different. There's just no way to predict. Some kids, very quick. Some kids, not as quick. And that's okay, because everybody's running their own race. And I love the language. I love the reframing that you're doing, because I think, you know, you as a parent coach are reaffirming that they're doing the right thing, and that's what they need to hear.
I think educational therapists, any kind of therapists, need to say to parents periodically, isn't your child so lucky that you're taking this action on their behalf?
Oh, that's a good way to say it.
We have to remind parents, because that cultural pressure, among all the other pressures, among the shame and the guilt that stays, it just stays with you. The frustration, it tamps down and gets better. But parents need reminders that, yay, you're doing the right thing. Good for you. Mm-hmm. You know, we need to be their cheerleaders just a little bit, because, you know, educational therapy not only builds self-confidence with kids and resilience and teaches them perseverance, it does the same for parents. And we keep that in mind. We're not just there for the children. We're there to basically give the parents clarity so they can now and in the future be a really good advocate, not just for their children, but for themselves.
As a family.
As a family.
Yeah.
Right.
Sari, this has been such an important and wonderful conversation. We want to make sure that our audience is able to connect with you. So what's the best way that our audience can connect with you?
The best way is go to my website, www.theparentaledge.com, and sign up for my newsletter, because I send out helpful tips and ideas to parents monthly. I also have lots of blogs there about topics like what I've talked about today and others that you can read. I'm active on Instagram, and I'm giving tips all the time on Instagram.
What's your Instagram handle?
At The Parental Edge.
I'm going to make you also add in how people can work with you, not just the free resources that you offer, but like how can people work with you?
Parents can book a session with me where we just talk. Also on my website, you can book a session with me where we just talk about what's keeping you up at night, and let me help you clarify and create a roadmap for perhaps how we could work together in the future. I have several programs. One is in person. I love in person. If you're in the LA area, I will come to your house. And if you're not, I will do virtual. Once you're in my program, I'm on call. You can call me anytime. It's not like, well, it's Tuesday at 1:00 and that's the only time I can talk to Sari. No, something's happening because it's kids and it's Wednesday at 8 a.m. You call me and I'm there for you.
I love that. We'll link all that important, juicy information in the show notes of this episode. Thank you so much for your time and for being here.
Yes, thank you.
I had such a great time. Have a great week, Smarties.
Have a great week.
Have a great week.